I figured out why people cheat. I really should have moved to a warmer climate. I said this to myself as I limped across the intersection to my townhouse. The damp April weather was playing havoc with my arthritis as I walked down the block. I noticed a tall, overweight man standing on the steps of my house. "Can I help you with something?" He flinched at the sound. I looked around and said, "Yes, I'm looking for Robert McNeil." "I'm Arthur Gordon." Finishing his sentence, I added, "I'm Robert McNeil. What can I do for you on this sunny morning?" Arthur's eyes assessed my short stature. He frowned. "I've come to talk to you about my wife," I said. I endured his stare, then asked, "Please step back so I can unlock the door. We can discuss it inside." Arthur stepped aside and followed me. "Inside, would you like a cup of coffee?" I made it before I went to get the morning paper. "If you like, we can sit in the breakfast nook at the back of the house. The sun is pleasantly warm here at this time of day." He nodded and retreated to the back of the hall. I brought coffee and sat down across from him. "What do you want to discuss?" I asked, stirring the cream and sugar into the coffee. He frowned as he handed me the envelope with the unsent letter inside. It was addressed to me with a stamp on the front. I took out the card and grinned. "Amy had a nasty sense of humor," it read. "Happy 25th birthday, my darling love, Amy." "What does that mean?" "McNeil, an affair with my wife." I grinned. "You might as well start calling me Robert. I hope you've cleared." I took the opportunity to enjoy my coffee, which Arthur wasn't too happy about. I first met Amy about 28 years ago. I was a patrolman at the time and had been assigned to walk around the neighborhood in my college clothes. One night I heard a scream and ran in the direction of the sound. I followed the sound of the screaming and found two guys holding down a woman while a third was pulling down her jeans. She managed to pull her arm free and started fighting back until one of them knocked her out. By then, the third man had undressed her below the waist and his pants were down to his knees. He was about to use her when I threw my leg up and hit him between the legs. He groaned and fell to the ground. His accomplice was too busy trying to remove her top to notice what was going on. I punched the second man in the side of the head with my fist as he fell. I kicked him under the ribs. I didn't notice that the last man had cut her bra with a knife until I turned to look at him. I saw something shiny cut my side and swung my arm to repel it. I pulled my gun from my ankle holster as the man lunged at me, firing twice from a couple of feet away. I radioed for help and cuffed the man. I kicked the man in the ribs and the man I kicked in the groin started to move until I kicked him in the balls again. The woman was conscious but in shock, so I dressed her as best I could and held her in my arms until help arrived. The paramedics were examining her when they noticed my hand. I had a 6. I was cut between my wrist and elbow and taken to hospital with the woman. She held my hand the whole way there and back. A few weeks later, the duty sergeant gave me a note from the woman I had rescued. She asked me to call her. Her name was Amy Davis. I called her the next day and she invited me to dinner on Wednesday. I had the day off, so I went. I met Amy. The other 2 victims were at a small Italian restaurant near the university. They treated me to dinner as a thank you for catching these guys. Amy stayed after the other women left. She told me she wanted to thank me, especially for saving her from what the other women were going through. She kissed me, told me I would always be in her prayers, handed me a small wrapped box and told me to open it when I got home. I took a silver chain with a silver heart from under my shirt and showed it to Arthur. It was engraved with my hero. "Amy never mentioned the attempted attack," said a stunned Arthur. "But the card says 25th. You said the assault was 28 years ago. You married Amy about a year after she graduated from high school. You worked in accounting together. She gave birth." Arthur muttered, "I apologize, but I have to leave you for a moment. I'll be right back." He excused himself and returned with a closed folder. He filled our cups again and opened the folder, continuing to talk. "Amy came to visit me when she was about 6 months pregnant. By then I was already a detective on the police force. She asked me if I knew a good private investigator. When I asked about this, she said she thought her husband was cheating on her because she had quite a bit of money saved up. So I asked her to give me the details, and I'll look into it." Arthur's eyes lowered as he waited for me to continue. "I think her name was Joyce. She worked for you for about 4 years. I always wondered how long you had an affair before you met Amy. You two seemed too relaxed together to have another affair. By the time Amy got pregnant, it had been over 2 years." Arthur said with a happy note in his voice, "How did it start?" "I heard rumors that Joyce thought her husband was cheating. I told her I had a friend who worked as a private investigator and would investigate her inexpensively. She went for it. My friend followed her husband to a seedy bar where he was drinking heavily and flirting with local girls. My friend paid $200. One of them went to a nearby motel to get the guy drunk. He offered another $200 for pictures of them making love to the guy. I showed Joyce the pictures since her husband was making a lot of money. I convinced her to get a lover for revenge. My plan worked for me. We were lovers for a long time until she suddenly quit. I pulled a set of 6 pictures out of a folder and put them in front of Arthur. I showed these to Joyce. I told her that if she didn't quit the company within 2 weeks, they'd be sent to her husband and parents. I also told her never to contact you again. Arthur rubbed his forehead. Human Resources said that Joyce had to quit because of a family emergency. I always thought her husband might have suspected why she was working late. Amy was pregnant, and I was wary of disturbing her. I told Amy that you were having drinks after work with a mixed group of colleagues. The workers were all there, and it didn't get any further than playful flirting. His questioning expression changed to a smirk. I'll wipe it off his face before I'm done. Everything was quiet until you were promoted to sales manager a month before Sarah was born. I continued putting away the first stack of photos and laying out new ones for Arthur to look at. You started having an affair with your secretary, Dolores, or Dee as you call her. I was busy at the Holiday Inn with Dee, so I didn't find out about your daughter's birth until late at night. Amy was doing just fine, by the way. I brought her in the patrol car when she couldn't find you. I stayed with her. Sarah is my mother's name, by the way. The smirk turned into a frown soon after that. Life got wrapped up and I lost sight of you for about 6 months. When I started looking again, you were still starring in Dee. I tossed a couple of... He threw a glance at the stack of photos. My life was going well. I figured I'd be promoted again in 5 years. I made love to Dee at least 3 times a week and got everything almost every morning before the rest of the staff came in. Then things got better. He smiled and nodded one afternoon. Amy called in utter despair and said that one of her friends had had a terrible accident. She would leave Sarah at her mother's house. Before going to her friend's house, she said she'd call when she knew more. I was concerned until she called that night. She said her friend was in critical condition with multiple injuries. She asked if I'd mind if they stayed at her mother's house, since it was closer to the hospital and work. Her friend was going to have surgery the day after tomorrow and physical therapy later. She was worried because her friend was... She said she'd be alone unless you counted Amy, who'd be watching the baby the whole time. I told her I thought it was really touching that she'd shown so much kindness to her friend. I said I'd be fine. Amy came home and picked out clothes for herself and the baby. She thanked me and promised to come home immediately if I needed her. I said we could see each other at lunch, and I could bring everything she needed from home. He went to work and put it in his car so he wouldn't have to drive all the way to our house. Arthur was quiet for a moment with his head down. She cried and hugged me for it. I was beginning to think I'd underestimated his feelings for Amy, until he lifted his head with a smirk on it. I was as excited as a kid in a candy store. I could drop her off right in the garage every night, and spend the night making love in our bed instead of in a motel, or on the couch in the office. The downside was that by the time Amy came home a few months later, Dee was starting to think about becoming the next Mrs. Arthur Gordon. He ran his fingers through his hair. I had a hard time convincing her that this standard of living wouldn't exist if I divorced Amy. Child support and alimony would have lowered our standard of living considerably. If she waited until my next promotion, we'd both get a big raise. Arthur kept looking more relaxed. Amy was like the Amy I married. She was grateful for my patience while she looked after her friend. She asked me if she could visit her friend a couple of times a week. She would pick Sarah up from daycare and take her with her on those nights. They would probably have dinner there, and come home late again. I was thrilled at the thought of Day and I being home. I asked her what days she was thinking of. Amy said Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Alternatively, she could go shopping on Saturday if it wouldn't interfere. I told her that was fine with me, and she should treat her friend to dinner on Saturdays, before she and Sarah came home. My life became wonderful again. Amy and Sarah were away more often than they were home. Amy hired a housekeeper to do the cleaning and laundry, daily cleaning and laundry. Amy cooked in the evenings when she got home early enough. And on the other evenings, I used takeout when we were both home. Amy would sit and talk to me after putting Sarah to bed. She encouraged me to tell her about my work, such as my current project when I would have to travel again, and when I thought I would be promoted. While Arthur was talking, I returned the previous photos to the file. I added a couple of new ones and passed them across the table. It seemed like you were seeing Dee for a long time, and then you started seeing a brunette on Thursday nights. Dee is single and in love with you, so... Why would you go for a married woman? The new romance seemed much more dangerous to me. Dee had gone on vacation, and Arthur remembered the events of that time. I told her it would arouse too much suspicion if we took a 3. I told her I'd be at work and at home during the week-long vacation we had coming up in 2 months. She should visit her family because we'd be spending a week together at a conference. Dee agreed, but moved her vacation up 2 weeks and made me promise to take her to Florida in the winter. I promised her I'd come to Orlando during the first week of February, but she didn't know. I was going to a marketing seminar in Florida, so I couldn't include her anyway. Dee was on vacation and Amy was visiting her friend, so on the way home I stopped at a small, quiet cafe for a drink and a bite to eat. This stunning brunette sat down next to me and ordered a drink. We talked for a while about why we were sitting around idle on a Thursday night. I told her. She told me that her wife was visiting a friend like she does every Thursday. The brunette looked at me and asked if I was interested in a strictly physical relationship with no emotional involvement because her husband is more concerned about making money than her. If I'm interested, I can meet her at the Holiday Inn room 141. 15 minutes after she leaves, I'll be there. You know the pictures. I went there. I didn't know her name and never learned it after the first time she met me in room 141 every Thursday night at 6. We'd have sex until we were exhausted and then shower together. I'd get dressed and leave. She always paid for the room. Like I said, I didn't know her name or see her car when she came back. I told her that we couldn't go out on Thursday. Since Amy had stopped going out on Thursdays for a while, a year and a half after it started, the brunette told me when we were showering that the fun was over. I left and never saw her again. She was a real estate developer's wife. I remarked carelessly, "You and Dee must have had a good time in Orlando," I said, putting the pictures away. Arthur seemed a little dismayed when He didn't send any pictures of his date in Florida. You went back to work feeling refreshed. You were promoted to department head. Dee was promoted to your executive assistant, and you even had time to get Amy pregnant again. I watched as his expression changed from happy to slightly worried. Then, life went on for you and Dee when Amy's due date came around. She got scared, I said, watching. I saw a sudden shock on Arthur's face as my words registered in his mind. Amy was afraid you wouldn't be around, just like last time. I was no longer on the police force to rush her to the hospital, so I convinced her to move with Sarah to my house for the last couple of weeks. Amy's mother had been living in the guest room by this time. As I continued the story, a blush was already rising up his neck. By then, Sarah had her own bedroom, and a new crib had been added for her soon-to-arrive sister. Amy knew about it months in advance, but didn't tell you it was going to be a girl. Ashley was born on Saturday morning. There were no problems and you were nowhere to be seen. The mother and daughter did great. Did you know the mother in... Arthur shook his head slowly, gathering his thoughts. Why did Amy come to you? He asked. What does that anniversary card mean? If you haven't figured it out yet, I'll tell you. I'm Amy's friend. I was the only one who ended up in the hospital after a botched drug raid. I was shot 6 times from my right thigh just above my ankle in a shootout with a fleeing drug dealer and 2 of his bodyguards. I spent many hours on the operating table bleeding, and the bones were badly damaged. It didn't look too good for me for a couple of days, so my friend called Amy to let her know about it. I woke up. I was in hospital for 3 days after the shooting, and Amy was the first face I saw. She visited me every day until I was released from the hospital after physical therapy. I couldn't return to active duty, so I was awarded a disability pension. My friend and I set up a private investigation business together. I've been keeping an eye on you for years now, ever since Amy first got in touch with me when she was pregnant with Sarah. I told her about the brunette in the motel you were seeing, and she was going to divorce you until she found out she was pregnant. Then she decided to stay with you for the sake of the kids. She said you could give them a great future. Future Amy told me she'd never sleep in the same room with you again. She said you had no interest in raising the children. You expected them to be fed and sent to their room before you got home. You didn't even see them for months and were happy about it. Even when they got older, you weren't interested in their lives because they were girls and couldn't follow in your footsteps when they were little. Amy would tell them that they were going to a special place when they came here for a night out or a vacation. She made sure their father didn't know about it, though, or he might stop it. As the girls got older, they realized what she said, that by the way they call me Daddy, she knew you didn't love her or the kids, but wouldn't divorce her for fear of ruining your chances for promotion. For the last 25 years, we've gone on vacation together, and you never once asked where she was going or who she was going with. The girls never went anywhere with you, but they could tell you about the places we'd been. You never asked where Amy was going or who she was going with. Why do you think she called you every time before she came home? She wanted you to have time to get your mistress out of the house. That's why you were never caught with her after Sarah and Ashley. After graduating from college, Amy started living her own life. Didn't you notice that she rarely came home for the night? Arthur just lowered his head, realizing how little attention he had paid to his wife and how much Amy had actually known about him all these years. You and Dee make a good team for the company, I said sincerely. I'm happy for you about the promotion and move to the corporate department. I understand Dee will be traveling with you as your manager too. Well done on selling your house. When is all this going to happen? Everything will be finalized by the end of the month. Arthur was surprised, raising his eyebrows at the fact that I didn't know that yet. I looked at my watch. Here's the point, Arthur. In about 5 minutes, 3 people are coming in. You'll be served with divorce papers. The other 2 are Amy's attorney and a notary public. Amy's asking for a no-fault divorce. She wants to split the assets in half. She signed this morning. You have to sign now. The notary will notarize it, and the lawyer will file it with the court. If anyone asks about your wife, tell them she filed for a no-fault divorce because she wants to stay with her daughters and sick mother after about a year. Marry Dee and live a happy life. I wouldn't advise cheating on Dee. She won't be as kind as Amy. The doorbell rang. I now knew what the photo file was about and didn't think there'd be any trouble from Arthur. I opened the door and showed the guest where Arthur was sitting. The processing server did his job in seconds and left. The attorney explained the divorce papers to Arthur and pointed out where to sign. The notary then notarized the signature, and that was that. I turned to Arthur and smiled. You're on your way to realizing your dream, I told him sincerely. I suggest you call Dee and tell her she's close to becoming your wife. I think you two will succeed very well in the corporate world. Arthur stopped on his way out. I looked out and saw him looking at me. What would you have done if I hadn't come looking for you today? I would have called your office and invited you in. I would have told you what I wanted to discuss. You would have come. Arthur just nodded and walked away. I picked up the phone and called. Good afternoon. This is Amy Gordon speaking. She signed off, asking if he'd told him about being Ashley's father. He hadn't, and he was pretty glum when she told him about their vacations together and how she and the girls practically lived there. She'd made reservations at Gino's, and they were going on their first date again.